My daughter-in-law stood up at Thanksgiving dinner, pushed away her plate, and announced to 23 family members that my cooking was disgusting and belonged in a dumpster. I'm Gerald Chen, 72 years old, and I've spent 50 years perfecting recipes my daughter-in-law never bothered to taste before insulting. She live-streamed her complaint to her 200,000 followers, called my traditional dishes peasant food, and demanded we cater future holidays from restaurants that meet her standards. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What she didn't know was that the restaurant she wanted to hire, I owned it, along with 14 others across 3 states, and the trust fund she got guaranteed her children's future, I controlled every cent of it. By the time dessert was served, she was no longer in my will, and by Monday morning, she'd discover exactly how much her words had cost her family. I didn't argue with her that night. I didn't defend myself or my cooking. I simply stood up from the head of the table, walked to my study, and made 2 phone calls that would change everything. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from, because this story starts 5 decades ago in a tiny restaurant kitchen in San Francisco's Chinatown, where I learned that the difference between feeding people and nourishing them isn't just about the food, it's about respect. And my daughter-in-law, Victoria Hayes, was about to learn what happens when you disrespect the wrong person. Most people look at me and see exactly what Victoria sees, an old man in his 70s who wears the same cardigan sweater my late wife bought me 20 years ago. Someone who still uses a flip phone from 2010 and drives a 2008 Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper. Someone who spends his Sundays hand-rolling dumplings in a kitchen that hasn't been renovated since 1995, using recipes written in faded Chinese characters on index cards yellowed with age. Victoria Hayes, 34 years old, 200,000 Instagram followers, married to my son Daniel for 6 years, and absolutely convinced that her father-in-law is a relic from another era who doesn't understand modern life. Gerald literally cooks like we're still in communist China, she told her followers last month in a video filmed in my driveway. My kids deserve better than whatever Depression-era food he's trying to pass off as culture. The first sign I was losing my daughter-in-law happened 8 months ago. She started referring to my recipes as old people food in conversations, then ethnic cooking that nobody really eats anymore, then just peasant dishes. When Daniel and I host Thanksgiving this year, we're obviously going to need to upgrade the menu, she announced during a family barbecue in July. Maybe something from Seasons, that new farm-to-table place, something people actually want to eat. Seasons. The name stuck with me for reasons she couldn't imagine. The second sign came when she posted an Instagram story from my kitchen. The video showed her opening my refrigerator, pointing at containers of marinating meat and fermenting vegetables, making exaggerated gagging sounds. The caption read, "When your in-laws think this is food, pray for me, fam." The comments were vicious. Her followers calling my traditional cooking disgusting, unsanitary, probably expired. One person wrote, "Girl, call the health department. Old people shouldn't be allowed to cook for children." Victoria screenshotted the worst comments and sent them to Daniel. "See, even strangers agree. Your dad's cooking is a health hazard. Your kids shouldn't be eating that stuff." I never responded when Daniel awkwardly tried to discuss it with me. I just saved the screenshots. What Victoria doesn't know is that I've been watching her Instagram stories for months, watching her show off the 3,000-square-foot house Daniel bought with money from a trust fund I established, the $15,000 handbag collection she displays in her closet tours, the private preschool tuition for my grandchildren that cost $45,000 per year paid from an account I control. In her world, Daniel earned all of it through his marketing job that pays $90,000 annually. I was just the lucky old immigrant who somehow scraped together enough to retire. My father-in-law is kind of a traditional cooking person. I heard her tell her yoga instructor at a class I happened to be picking up my grandchildren from last spring. Very old-school Chinatown vibes. He means well, but he doesn't really understand American culinary standards or what's actually healthy. We're trying to gently transition the family to more contemporary options. Contemporary options. As if 50 years of culinary knowledge could be dismissed with a buzzword. But the breaking point wasn't the comments or the dismissal or even the health department joke. It was what happened 3 weeks before Thanksgiving when Victoria came to my house for what she called a family planning meeting. She walked into my kitchen like she owned it, Daniel trailing behind, looking uncomfortable, and immediately started taking pictures of my spice cabinet and my wok collection. Gerald, Victoria said, pulling out her phone and opening a notes app, Daniel and I have been discussing Thanksgiving. We think it's time to make some changes to the menu. Changes to a menu I've been preparing for 47 years. She started reading from her list. We want to replace the traditional turkey with something more elevated, maybe a heritage breed from Whole Foods. The sides should be lighter, more Instagram-friendly, definitely no organ meats or weird fermented things, and we absolutely cannot serve anything that looks, she paused, searching for the right word, too authentic. My followers expect a certain aesthetic. Too authentic. My own food in my own home. Dad, Daniel interjected weakly. Victoria just means maybe we could incorporate some dishes that appeal to a wider audience. Your cooking is great, but some of the ingredients are kind of intense for people who aren't used to them. People who aren't used to them. My own grandchildren. What happens if I want to cook what I've always cooked? I asked quietly. Victoria laughed. Gerald, be realistic. You're 72 years old. The cooking is getting to be too much for you anyway. Let Daniel and me handle Thanksgiving this year. We've already talked to Seasons about catering. They have a beautiful seasonal menu that would be perfect for the Instagram content I'm planning. Instagram content at my Thanksgiving table. The cost is reasonable too, Victoria continued. Only about $3,000 for 25 people. Daniel can cover it from the household account. She meant the household account I fund with monthly transfers of $8,000, money she thinks Daniel earns. What if I said, I want to cook? I asked. Victoria's smile tightened. Gerald, I'm trying to be respectful here, but honestly, your cooking is becoming an issue. The kids come home smelling like whatever spices you use. Their friends' parents are starting to ask questions. It's not the image we want for our family. Not the image she wants for her Instagram feed. I'll think about it, I said. Victoria stood up, clearly expecting that to be the end of it. Just let us know by this weekend. We need to confirm with Seasons, and honestly, it would be easier if you just stepped back and let the younger generation handle things. The younger generation handling things in my house with my money. She left, and I sat in my kitchen, looking at the woks my wife and I bought together 50 years ago, the cleaver her mother gave me when we got married, the recipe box filled with cards written in her handwriting, each one a memory of dishes we perfected together over decades. And I realized my daughter-in-law genuinely believed she was doing me a favor by taking over my kitchen. That night, Victoria had no idea what she'd just triggered. I opened the drawer in my study where I keep important documents, estate planning papers I haven't looked at in 2 years, business incorporation documents, bank statements from accounts Victoria doesn't know exist. And I made a list of phone calls I would need to make the day after Thanksgiving. Because if Victoria wanted to replace my cooking with catered food from Seasons, she was about to learn something interesting about who actually owned Seasons and 13 other restaurants she loved to post about on Instagram.
Thanksgiving morning started at 4:30, the way it had for 47 years. I was in my kitchen preparing the dishes my late wife and I used to make together, following recipes we'd perfected over decades of trial and error. The turkey was brining in a mixture my wife's grandmother brought from Guangdong province in 1952. The dumplings were hand-folded using a technique that took me 3 years to master. The braised pork belly was marinating in a sauce that required 14 ingredients and 2 days of preparation. By 9 in the morning, My kitchen smelled like every Thanksgiving I could remember. Ginger and star anise and rice wine, soy sauce and rock sugar and dried tangerine peel. Scents that reminded me of my wife, of our restaurant. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 50 years of feeding people who became family. Daniel arrived at 10 with Victoria and my 2 grandchildren, Sophie and James. The kids ran straight to the kitchen the way they always did, excited to see what Grandpa was making. Victoria followed, her phone already out, recording everything for her Instagram stories. "Oh, wow," she said loudly, making sure her phone caught her reaction. "It smells very strong in here. Very ethnic." She said ethnic the way other people might say contaminated. The kids were already climbing onto stools to watch me fold dumplings. "Can we help, Grandpa?" Sophie asked. She was 7 years old and loved pressing the dumpling edges together, even though half of them fell apart when we boiled them. "Actually," Victoria said, pulling Sophie down from the stool, "we need to talk about something first." She turned to me, phone still recording. "Gerald, I thought we agreed you weren't cooking this year." "We didn't agree to anything," I said calmly, continuing to fold dumplings. "I said I'd think about it." "Well, I already confirmed with Seasons. They're delivering at 2 o'clock. So maybe you can just," she gestured vaguely at my dishes, "put all this away? We don't want to confuse people with 2 completely different meals." Put away food I'd been preparing for 2 days? "Victoria, this is my house. This is my Thanksgiving. I'm cooking what I've always cooked." Her expression hardened. She stopped recording and put her phone down. "Gerald, I'm trying to be nice about this, but your cooking is honestly not appropriate anymore. My children shouldn't be eating food that's prepared in unsanitary conditions with ingredients that aren't FDA regulated." Every ingredient in my kitchen came from stores she shopped at, but facts didn't matter when she'd already decided on her narrative. "The dumplings are a health code violation waiting to happen," Victoria continued. "The fermented vegetables are basically spoiled food, and whatever that smell is," she pointed at my braising pot, "it's making me nauseous. I'm not letting my children eat any of this." Daniel stood in the doorway, looking miserable. "Dad, maybe we could compromise. You could make a few dishes, and we could supplement with the Seasons order." Supplement? As if my food was insufficient on its own. The guests started arriving at noon. My brother and his wife, Daniel's cousins, family friends who'd been coming to my Thanksgiving for decades. Victoria greeted everyone at the door, explaining loudly that there would be real food arriving soon from a professional restaurant because Gerald insisted on cooking despite everyone's concerns about food safety. By 1 o'clock, 23 people were crowded into my home. Victoria had positioned herself near the kitchen, intercepting anyone who tried to sample the dishes I'd prepared. "I wouldn't eat that if I were you," I heard her tell my nephew. "Gerald doesn't really follow modern food safety standards." At 1:30, the Seasons delivery arrived. 3 catering staff members carried in aluminum trays of what Victoria called elevated seasonal cuisine. Herb-crusted turkey breast, truffle mashed potatoes, roasted Brussels sprouts with pancetta. Everything looked like it came from a magazine photo shoot and smelled like nothing at all. Victoria immediately started arranging the catered food on my dining table, pushing my dishes to the side. She set up her phone on a tripod and went live on Instagram. "Hey everyone, we're doing Thanksgiving a little different this year. Finally convinced the family to try something more contemporary instead of the usual heavy ethnic food." 200,000 people watching her dismiss my cooking in my own home. When everyone sat down to eat, Victoria made a show of serving herself only from the Seasons trays. The kids hesitated, looking at my dishes, but Victoria quickly filled their plates with catered food. "Remember what Mommy said about Grandpa's cooking," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. My brother's wife, Helen, ignored Victoria completely and loaded her plate with my dumplings and braised pork belly. "This looks amazing, Gerald, just like Susan used to make." My wife's name. Helen was one of the few people who remembered. Victoria wrinkled her nose. "I don't know how you can eat that. The smell alone is making me sick." Several other guests started helping themselves to my food. The dumplings disappeared quickly. The braised pork belly was gone within minutes. People were going back for seconds, thirds, barely touching the catered food that Victoria had spent $3,000 on. Victoria's face got tight. She picked up her phone and started recording again. "So, apparently, some people are choosing to eat the," she paused for effect, "non-professional food despite legitimate health concerns. Just want to document this in case anyone gets food poisoning later." My nephew, Marcus, a food critic for the San Francisco Chronicle, was on his third dumpling. "Victoria, these are incredible. Gerald, seriously, you could sell these. The wrapper texture is perfect and the filling is so balanced. Where'd you learn to make these?" "My wife taught me. We used to make them every week in our restaurant." Victoria laughed. "Restaurant is a generous word. It was like a hole-in-the-wall takeout place in Chinatown, barely even a real business." The table got quiet. Marcus set down his fork. "Victoria, do you know which restaurant Gerald owned?" "Past tense," Victoria said. "It closed like 20 years ago, probably health code violations." I said nothing, just watched my daughter-in-law dig herself deeper. Marcus looked at me, then back at Victoria. The restaurant was Golden Pearl. It had 2 Michelin stars for 18 consecutive years. It was one of the most acclaimed Chinese restaurants in California history. Gerald and his wife were literally legends in the culinary world. Victoria's smile froze. "That's not—" She looked at me. "You never said anything about Michelin stars." "You never asked," I said quietly. "But—" Victoria was flustered now, her phone still recording. "If that's true, why did you close it?" "My wife got sick, cancer. I closed the restaurant to take care of her. We had 2 years together before she passed. Those 2 years were worth more than any amount of stars." The table was completely silent. Victoria's phone was still recording, capturing her expression as she realized she'd been mocking a James Beard Award winner's cooking, dismissing recipes that food critics had written about in the New York Times. "Well," Victoria said, trying to recover, "Michelin stars were probably easier to get back then. Food standards were different. Modern restaurants are more sophisticated." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but I held up my hand. "Victoria, do you know how Michelin stars work?" She shrugged. "It's just like a rating system, right? Restaurants pay for them or something." Several people at the table made choking sounds. Marcus looked genuinely offended. "Michelin stars are awarded by anonymous inspectors. Restaurants can't buy them. Most chefs spend their entire careers trying to earn just 1 star. My restaurant had 2 stars for almost 2 decades. Fewer than 100 restaurants in America can say that." Victoria's face was red. "Well, that was a long time ago. Things change." She stood up abruptly and pushed her plate away. The season's food barely touched. "You know what? I'm done pretending. This food," she gestured at my dishes, "is disgusting. It's heavy and greasy and smells weird, and I don't want my children eating it. I don't care how many stars you used to have. This isn't food normal people eat." She picked up her phone, making sure it was still recording. "I'm going live to let everyone know that we tried to be polite, but honestly, some people just refuse to join the modern world. My kids deserve better than peasant food from someone who can't accept that his time has passed." 23 people stared at Victoria. Her phone was capturing everything, broadcasting to 200,000 followers. And I realized my daughter-in-law had just made the biggest mistake of her life on camera in front of witnesses with no way to take it back.
I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply stood up from my chair, walked past Victoria, who was still recording her rant for Instagram, and went to my study. Behind me, I could hear the uncomfortable silence at the table, broken only by Victoria's continued commentary into her phone about outdated cooking and stubborn old people who refuse to adapt. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out my phone. The flip phone Victoria had mocked countless times. The one she thought proved I was technologically incompetent and out of touch with modern life. I dialed the first number from memory. "Catherine," I said when she answered. "It's Gerald. I need you to prepare some documents for me. Estate revision. Full removal of a beneficiary. I need everything finalized by Monday morning." Catherine Morrison had been my attorney for 32 years. She knew my voice well enough to hear what I wasn't saying. "Gerald, are you sure? This sounds like a holiday argument. Maybe wait until emotions settle." "I'm certain," I said. "I've been watching this build for 8 months. Today was just the final confirmation. The documents we discussed last year, the contingency plans, execute all of them." "All of them," Catherine repeated. "That's extensive, Gerald. That affects trusts, property transfers, business interests. You're talking about restructuring everything." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. How fast can you move?" "If you're serious, I can have preliminary paperwork ready by Saturday, full execution by Tuesday. But Gerald, this will have significant implications for Daniel and the grandchildren." "The grandchildren's trusts remain untouched," I said. "Everything else proceeds as planned. I'll expect your call Saturday morning." I hung up and dialed the second number. "James, this is Gerald Chen. I need you to run a full audit on the family accounts. Every transfer, every payment, every dollar that's moved in the past 6 years. I want documentation of exactly where the money went and who spent it." James Wu, my accountant for 27 years, didn't ask questions. "When do you need this?" "Monday. And James, include the comparison analysis we discussed, what Daniel actually earns versus household expenses. Make it very clear where the additional funding originated." "Understood. Gerald, should I prepare for legal review?" "Catherine's already handling that end. Just give me the numbers. The truth always lives in the numbers." The third call was the one that would change everything. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 6 months. The private line that bypassed all the restaurant's front-of-house staff. "Seasons Restaurant, how may I help you?" "This is Gerald Chen. I need to speak with Martin." There was a pause. "Mr. Chen, of course. One moment, please." Martin Hayes came on the line 30 seconds later. "Gerald, this is unexpected. Is everything all right?" "Martin, I need to know about a catering order delivered to my home today. Thanksgiving meal for 25 people. Ordered by Victoria Hayes." I heard typing in the background. "Yes, I have it here. Paid with a credit card ending in 7834. Total was $3,200 with delivery and service fees. Is there a problem with the order? Who pays the bills for that credit card?" More typing. "According to our customer file, the card is under Daniel Chen's name, but we have a note that it's linked to a household account. Why?" "Because that household account is funded entirely by monthly transfers I make, which means Victoria just spent $3,000 of my money to replace my cooking in my own home. Money I provided so she could use it to insult me." Martin was quiet for a moment. "Gerald, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything yet. Martin, I need you to pull all the Victoria's transaction records at Seasons. Every meal, every reservation, every dollar she spent at my restaurant. I want to know the total." "Give me a moment." I could hear more typing, then a low whistle. "Gerald, over the past 18 months, Victoria has spent $47,000 at Seasons, almost all of it charged to that same household account card." $47,000 of my money spent at a restaurant I own, funding a lifestyle she used to mock my cooking. "Martin," I said quietly, "you've managed Seasons for me for 8 years. You've done an excellent job, but I'm going to need you to make some changes to your customer policies starting Monday." "What kind of changes?" "The kind that affect who gets reservations and who doesn't. I'll send you a list of names. Very short list. Just 2 names, actually. Victoria and Daniel Hayes. I want them blacklisted from all 14 restaurants." "All 14?" Martin repeated. Gerald, that's every restaurant in the Chen Holdings portfolio. That's not just Seasons. That's the Pearl, Golden Lotus, Harbor Moon, all of them. You're talking about banning them from the most sought-after restaurants in 3 states. I'm aware of what I own, and I'm very clear about who should and shouldn't be welcome in establishments that bear my reputation. Consider it done. The list will be distributed to all managers by Sunday evening. But Gerald, this is going to cause questions. Victoria posts about our restaurants constantly on Instagram. She's driven a lot of social media traffic our way. She's driven traffic to restaurants she didn't know I owned, using money she didn't know came from me, while publicly mocking the chef who trained most of your kitchen staff. I think we'll survive without her food photography. I hung up and returned to the dining room. Victoria was still standing, her phone still recording, now explaining to her followers how disrespectful and unreasonable old people could be when you tried to modernize their outdated traditions. I walked past her to the head of the table and sat down. 22 people, family and friends who'd been coming to my Thanksgiving for decades, watched me in silence. Victoria finally noticed I'd returned and turned her camera toward me. "So Gerald's back from his tantrum," she said to her phone. "Probably going to guilt trip everyone about respecting elders or whatever. This is exactly the kind of manipulative behavior I've been dealing with." I picked up my fork and took a bite of the braised pork belly. It was perfect. The same recipe my wife had perfected over 30 years of adjustments. The same dish that had earned us our first Michelin star in 1987. "Victoria," I said calmly, still chewing, "do you know what this pork belly costs to make?" She rolled her eyes. "I don't care about your grocery bills, Gerald." "Humor me. Take a guess." "Fine. Like $30 of pork and some cheap spices. Maybe $40 total. Happy?" "The pork is $60 from a heritage farm in Sonoma. The spices are another $80, most of them imported from specific regions in China because the flavor profiles matter. The rice wine is $40 a bottle. The rock sugar is specialty grade. The dry tangerine peel is aged for 5 years and costs more per ounce than your truffled mashed potatoes. One batch of this dish costs about $250 in ingredients and takes 3 days to prepare properly." Several people at the table stopped eating to listen. "But the recipe?" I continued. "That's priceless. My wife's grandmother brought it from Guangdong province in 1952. My wife and I spent 15 years perfecting it. Food critics from the New York Times and Los Angeles Times wrote about this specific dish. It was Anthony Bourdain's favorite when he visited Golden Pearl in 2004. He called it the best braised pork he'd ever eaten and put us on his list of 13 places to eat before you die." Victoria's smile was gone. Her phone was still recording, capturing every word. "The dumplings you called a health code violation. Those take 4 hours to make from scratch. The wrapper dough has to rest for exactly 90 minutes. The filling ratio is calibrated to the gram. The folding technique took me 3 years to master under my wife's instruction. We made 40,000 dumplings a year at Golden Pearl. James Beard Foundation gave us an award specifically for those dumplings in 1993. I set down my fork and looked directly at Victoria's camera. "The fermented vegetables you called spoiled food? Those are made using a fermentation process that's been refined over 800 years. The bacteria cultures in those vegetables are the same ones used in kimchi and sauerkraut and every other fermented food that's currently trendy in your Instagram world. The difference is mine are made the traditional way, not the shortcuts your contemporary restaurants use." Victoria lowered her phone slightly. "Gerald, I didn't mean—" "You called my cooking disgusting," I said quietly. "You live-streamed that opinion to 200,000 people. You told our family that my food belongs in a dumpster. You spent $3,000 to replace dishes that took me 3 days to prepare. And you did all of this in my home, at my table, on my holiday." The room was absolutely silent. "So, I made 3 calls," I continued. "The first was to my attorney. The second was to my accountant. The third was to the manager of Seasons Restaurant. Would you like to know what those calls were about? Victoria's face had gone pale. She shook her head slightly, but I continued anyway. The attorney is revising my will. You're being removed as a beneficiary. Completely. Every trust fund, every inheritance clause, every provision I made for Daniel's family that included you, gone. But the accountant is documenting exactly how much money I've transferred.
Victoria's phone slipped from her hand and clattered onto my dining table. The screen was still lit, still broadcasting live to her 200,000 followers, now capturing her expression as she processed what I'd just said. "You can't do that," she whispered. "You can't just ban me from restaurants." "I can do exactly that," I said. "They're my restaurants. I decide who's welcome and who isn't. And someone who calls my cooking disgusting while spending $47,000 of my money at establishments I built doesn't deserve the privilege of eating there." Daniel had gone completely white. "Dad, I don't understand. When did you buy restaurants? How do you own Seasons? You drive a 2008 Civic." "I drive a 2008 Civic because it runs perfectly well," I said. "I wear the same cardigan because your mother bought it for me and I like remembering her when I wear it. I use a flip phone because I don't need anything fancier to make calls. None of that has anything to do with how much money I have or what I own." Helen, my sister-in-law, was starting to smile. "Gerald, are you telling us you've been playing poor this whole time?" "I've never played anything," I said. "I just never corrected people's assumptions. Victoria assumed that because I live simply, I must be simple. She assumed that because I'm old, I must be irrelevant. She assumed that because I cook traditional food, I must not understand modern cuisine. Every assumption was wrong." Marcus, the food critic, was grinning now. "Chen Holdings. Gerald, I've reviewed half your restaurants. The Pearl got a 4-star review from me last year. Harbor Moon is on every best of list in the Bay Area. You're telling me you've owned all of them this entire time and never said anything?" "Why would I?" I asked. "I hired excellent managers. I stayed out of their way. I let them build their own reputations. My role was to provide resources and occasionally consult on recipes. I didn't need credit or recognition. I just wanted good restaurants that served good food." Victoria found her voice again. "This is insane. Daniel, your father has been lying to us for years, pretending to be some poor retired cook when he's actually rich. That's manipulative. That's financial abuse." "Financial abuse," I repeated softly. "Let me tell you about financial abuse, Victoria. For 6 years, I've transferred $8,000 every month into Daniel's household account. That's $96,000 per year. Over 6 years, that's $576,000. Money I gave to support my son's family." I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. James, my accountant, had emailed me preliminary numbers while I was in my study. "Daniel's salary is $90,000 per year. After taxes, that's roughly $67,000 take-home. Your household expenses, Victoria, based on your Instagram posts and credit card records, are approximately $15,000 per month. That's $180,000 per year, which means you've been spending almost triple what Daniel actually earns." The math was landing now. People around the table were doing calculations in their heads. "The difference," I said, "came from me. Every designer handbag, every private preschool tuition payment, every vacation to Bali and Greece and the Maldives that you posted about, every dinner at trendy restaurants, every luxury you've been showcasing to your followers as proof of your successful lifestyle. I paid for all of it." Daniel's head was in his hands. "Dad, I thought the money was from my investment returns, from the trust fund you set up when I was born." "The trust fund is for emergencies and your children's education. It's never been touched. Every dollar you've spent came from monthly transfers I made because I wanted my son and his family to be comfortable. I never told you because I didn't want you to feel obligated or guilty. I just wanted you to be happy." "This is blackmail," Victoria said, but her voice was shaking. "You're trying to control us with money." "I'm not controlling anything," I said. "I'm simply stopping. As of Monday, the monthly transfers end.
Daniel's household will run on Daniel's actual salary. You'll discover very quickly what you can actually afford versus what you thought you could afford." The silence that followed was profound. I could see Victoria calculating, mentally reviewing her credit card bills, her subscriptions, her standing reservations at restaurants she could no longer afford. "I'll get a job," Victoria said. "I have 200,000 followers. Grands will sponsor me. I'll make my own money." "That's an excellent plan," I said. "I encourage you to pursue that. But Victoria, you should know that your Instagram account currently makes approximately $2,000 per month from sponsorships and affiliate links. That's based on the financial disclosure forms you filed when applying for credit card increases. $24,000 per year won't quite cover the lifestyle you've been posting about." Her face crumbled. "How do you know about my credit applications?" "I co-signed for Daniel's mortgage. The bank sends me copies of all credit activity on linked accounts. I've been watching your spending for 6 years. I said nothing because I hoped you'd mature, hoped you'd appreciate what you had, hoped you'd eventually show some respect for family and tradition." I stood up from the table. Around me, 22 people sat in stunned silence. Victoria's phone was still recording, still broadcasting everything to her followers. Let them hear it. Let them understand. "The will revision will be final by Tuesday," I said. "You're removed as a beneficiary, Victoria, but Daniel remains. The children remain. I'm not punishing them for your behavior. I'm simply ensuring that you don't benefit from disrespecting me." "Gerald," Daniel said quietly, "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know she was saying these things about you. The Instagram posts, the comments, I didn't see most of them." "I know," I said. "That's the only reason you're still in the will. But Daniel, you're going to need to make some choices. Your wife just insulted me in front of 23 witnesses and 200,000 Instagram followers. She called my cooking disgusting. She demanded I be replaced in my own home. She spent 3 days mocking my food while eating at restaurants I own." I looked at Victoria directly. "You wanted contemporary food, modern standards, Instagram-worthy presentations. You got exactly what you asked for from Seasons, a restaurant I built from the ground up 12 years ago. A restaurant that exists because I understood modern cuisine and invested in young chefs who wanted to experiment. You thought I was out of touch, but I was funding the exact trends you worshipped." Marcus was laughing now, actually laughing. "Victoria, do you understand what just happened? You've been eating at Gerald's restaurants and using his money to pay for meals while publicly mocking the man who literally created the dining scene you're obsessed with. This is the best story I've heard in 20 years of food journalism." "Don't you dare write about this," Victoria snapped. "I don't need to write about it," Marcus said. "You just broadcast the entire thing live to 200,000 people. This is already out there. And honestly, Gerald being revealed as the owner of Chen Holdings is going to be huge news in the food world. Most people thought Gerald retired after Golden Pearl closed. Nobody knew he pivoted to building a restaurant empire." Victoria grabbed her phone and finally ended the live stream, but the damage was done. 23 minutes of footage showing her mocking my cooking, then my calm revelation of exactly who I was and what I owned. Her followers had watched her dig her own grave. "I want to leave," Victoria said to Daniel. "I want to take the children and go home." "The children can stay," I said. "In fact, I'd like them to stay. Sophie and James should eat their grandfather's cooking. They should learn about their heritage and their grandmother's recipes. They should understand where they come from before they're taught to be ashamed of it." Victoria looked at Daniel, waiting for him to defend her. He sat silent, staring at his plate. "You're choosing his side?" Daniel said. "I'm choosing the side of not insulting my father in his own home. I'm choosing the side of being grateful instead of entitled. I'm choosing the side of teaching my children respect." Victoria looked around the table, searching for support. She found none. Even the guests who barely knew me were watching her with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. "This isn't over," Victoria said. "I'll get a lawyer. I'll fight this." "Catherine Morrison," I said. "She's my attorney. 32 years of experience in estate law. If you want to challenge the will revision, you're welcome to try. But Victoria, you should know that I've documented everything. Every Instagram post where you mocked my cooking, every comment about health code violations and unsanitary conditions, every screenshot of your followers calling my food disgusting, all of it will be presented as evidence of disrespect and justification for disinheritance." Her face fell. She'd created the evidence herself, posted it publicly, made it permanent. "I'm leaving," she said. "And when I do, don't expect me to come back." "That's your choice," I said. "But the children will always be welcome here. Daniel will always be welcome. And if you ever decide to apologize, genuinely apologize without qualifications or excuses, we can discuss whether you might be welcome too." Victoria grabbed her purse and walked out. The front door slammed behind her. Through the window, I watched her stand on my driveway, phone out, probably calling an Uber and already crafting her next Instagram post about how she was the victim in all of this. Inside, the table remained silent. Then Sophie, my 7-year-old granddaughter, spoke up. "Grandpa, can I have more dumplings?" The tension broke. People laughed. I served Sophie 3 more dumplings and watched her eat them with the kind of enthusiasm Victoria had tried to shame out of her. "Dad," Daniel said, "I'm so sorry. I should have said something months ago. I should have stood up for you." "You're standing up now," I said. "That's what matters." Marcus raised his glass. "To Gerald Chen, 2-time Michelin star chef, James Beard Award winner, and apparently the secret..."
The morning after Thanksgiving, Victoria's live stream had been viewed 3.2 million times. By Sunday, it was trending on every social media platform. Not because people sympathized with her, but because they were fascinated by the story of the humble elderly man who turned out to own a restaurant empire. The food media picked it up immediately. Marcus wrote a feature for the San Francisco Chronicle titled "The Secret Empire of Gerald Chen: How a Michelin-starred legend quietly built California's most respected restaurant group." The article included interviews with chefs I'd mentored, managers I'd supported, and food critics who remembered Golden Pearl. Within a week, Victoria's follower count dropped from 200,000 to 73,000. The comments on her old posts were brutal. People calling her ungrateful, disrespectful, foolish. Screenshots of her mocking my cooking were compared to photos of Golden Pearl's Michelin stars, my James Beard Award, Anthony Bourdain's praise. She tried to do damage control, posted a tearful apology video claiming she'd been stressed and didn't mean what she said. But the internet doesn't forget, and neither do the 200,000 witnesses who watched her call my cooking disgusting in real time. Daniel filed for separation in January. Not divorce yet, but a legal separation that protected his finances from Victoria's mounting credit card debt. Turns out, when you're spending $200,000 a year on an income of $67,000, things fall apart quickly. Victoria moved in with her parents in Phoenix. She got a job doing social media management for a dental office, making $42,000 a year. Her Instagram account still exists, but she rarely posts now. The comments are always the same. "Remember when you insulted a Michelin star chef? How's that peasant food looking now? Golden Pearl forever." Daniel and the children stayed in their house for 3 months until they couldn't afford the mortgage anymore. I didn't offer to help. Daniel needed to learn, and he did. He sold the house, downsized to a 3-bedroom apartment, and started actually managing a budget. He got a promotion at work that brought his salary to $110,000. Still not enough to fund Victoria's lifestyle, but enough to live comfortably with his children. Sophie and James come to my house every Sunday. We make dumplings together. I teach them the recipes their grandmother perfected. I tell them stories about Golden Pearl, about the famous people who ate there, about the night Anthony Bourdain sat at our kitchen counter and declared my braised pork the best he'd ever tasted. They don't smell like spices anymore when they go home, because Victoria isn't there to complain. They smell like ginger and star anise and their heritage, and Daniel tells them to be proud of it. The restaurant ban stayed in effect. Victoria tried to make a reservation at the Pearl under a fake name 6 weeks after Thanksgiving. The hostess recognized her voice and politely informed her that the reservation system was fully booked for the next 8 months. It wasn't, but Victoria didn't need to know that. She tried again at Harbor Moon, same result. She finally understood that I wasn't bluffing. Every restaurant she'd loved,
Every trendy spot she'd used for Instagram content, every establishment she'd held up as an example of real food culture, all of them closed to her permanently. The will revision was finalized on December 3rd. Catherine made sure every detail was documented, every justification clear. Victoria's name appeared nowhere in my estate planning. If I died tomorrow, she would inherit nothing. Not a dollar, not a property, not a single share in Chen Holdings. Daniel stayed in the will. The children's trusts remained protected and actually grew. I increased the education funds after watching Sophie and James embrace their cultural heritage. My brother inherited my home. Various charities received significant donations, and Chen Holdings was set up to transition to a foundation that would support culinary education for underprivileged youth. But the biggest change wasn't in my will, it was in me. For years after my wife died, I'd been content to stay invisible, to live quietly, to let my restaurant succeed without my name attached, to avoid attention. Victoria's insults changed that. Not because they hurt me, but because they reminded me that staying silent can be mistaken for weakness. So I started saying yes to interviews. The Chronicle piece led to a profile in Bon Appetit, then Food and Wine, then a James Beard Foundation event where I did a cooking demonstration of my wife's dumpling recipe. I was 72 years old and suddenly being treated like a culinary treasure, a living link to a generation of Chinese-American cooking that had helped define California cuisine. Young chefs started reaching out to me, asking for advice, for mentorship, for investment in their restaurants. I said yes more often than I said no. Chen Holdings expanded to include 3 new restaurants in the first quarter alone, each one led by a chef that reminded me of my younger self, hungry, talented, and respectful of tradition while pushing towards innovation. In March, I received a letter from Victoria, 5 pages, handwritten, no Instagram filter to hide behind. She apologized. Really apologized, not the performative kind. She explained that she'd built her entire identity around appearance and status, and meeting someone who had everything she wanted but displayed none of it had threatened her completely. She'd lashed out because she didn't understand how I could be content with a 2008 Civic and a flip phone when she could afford so much more. The letter ended with a simple request. She wanted to learn to make my dumplings, not for Instagram, not for content, but because Sophie had told her that making dumplings with Grandpa was the best part of her week, and Victoria realized she'd never actually cooked with her own children. I read the letter 3 times. Then I called Daniel. "I received a letter from your wife," I said. "I know. She told me she was going to. I didn't ask her to, if that's what you're wondering. What do you think?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I think she's finally understanding what she lost. Not the money. She's dealing with that. But the family. The connection. The kids ask about her, but they don't ask to see her. They'd rather be at your house making dumplings than with their mother in Phoenix. That's killing her." Should I respond? "That's up to you, Dad. But for what it's worth, I think she's genuine this time. Losing everything tends to clarify what actually matters." I thought about it for a week. Then I called Victoria. "I received your letter," I said. "Mr. Chen, Gerald, I meant every word. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but the next time Daniel brings the children to visit, you can come too. We'll make dumplings. I'll teach you the way my wife taught me. But Victoria, if you bring your phone, if you take a single picture, if you post anything about it, you'll never be invited back. This is about family, not content." She was crying. "Thank you. Thank you. I promise, no phone. I just want to learn. I just want my kids to see me trying." The following Sunday, Victoria came to my house for the first time in 3 months. She looked different. Less makeup, cheaper clothes, an expression that suggested she'd spent a lot of time thinking about who she'd been. Sophie and James were cautious around her at first. They'd gotten used to their mother not being there. But when I announced we were making dumplings and Victoria put on an apron and stood next to them at the counter, something shifted. I taught her the way my wife taught me, patient, detailed,
emphasizing that the recipe wasn't just about ingredients, but about intention and respect. Victoria struggled with the folding technique. Her dumplings looked terrible, lopsided, poorly sealed, nothing like the perfect pleats Sophie was managing. But she kept trying, and when we boiled them and 3 of her dumplings fell apart in the pot, she laughed instead of getting frustrated. She said, "I guess I need more practice." That's what my wife told me for 3 years. The first 1,000 dumplings I made were garbage, but she never gave up on teaching me, and I never gave up on learning. We ate together that afternoon. Victoria tried every dish, including the fermented vegetables she'd once called spoiled food. She didn't pretend to love everything. Some of the flavors were still too strong for her palate, but she tried, and she didn't complain. "This braised pork, this is what Anthony Bourdain wrote about?" she said quietly. "Yes." "Can you teach me to make it?" "It takes 3 days. I have time now. I have a lot of time." Over the next 3 months, Victoria came every Sunday. She learned to make dumplings that didn't fall apart. She learned the braised pork recipe, though hers didn't taste quite right yet. That would take years. She learned to fold wonton and roll noodles and balance the 5 flavors my wife had taught me were essential to proper Chinese cooking. She never took photos, never posted about it, never mentioned it to her remaining Instagram followers. This wasn't content. This was penance and education, and slowly rebuilding a bridge she burned to the ground. In June, Daniel asked me to meet him for lunch. We met at the Pearl, one of my restaurants. He'd never eaten there before, couldn't afford it on his salary, and refused to ask me to comp his meal. "I'm paying," I said when the check came. "Dad, you don't have to." "I want to. This is my restaurant, my treat, and my way of saying I'm proud of you." Daniel looked at me. "Proud of me for what? For letting my marriage fall apart? For not standing up to Victoria sooner?" "For standing up at all," I said. "Proud of you for choosing your children's well-being over keeping your wife happy. Proud of you for learning to live within your means without resentment. That takes courage." "Daniel, Victoria wants to reconcile. She's been..."
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.